I'm Andrea Thompson, Editor-in-Chief at Marie Claire in the UK. At Marie Claire, you know, we have a big focus on ethical business, sustainability, and at the moment are really looking at the UN goals and some of the big kind of stuff around that. So it's quite interesting to now look at what you're doing from an Africa-centric point of view, and you know, the support that you're giving your students in order to kind of keep their skills and their expertise in the country and to put the focus on Africa. So I've got about 8 questions that I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
And they range from, you know, tips around leadership and how you build teams to some of your broader vision around the university and the goals for the future, as well as just looking at the last year and COVID.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
That's good.
Okay, so I want to kick off by looking back at the past sort of 12 to 18 months and ask you what the biggest challenges the university has faced following the pandemic and how you've tackled them.
Well, the biggest challenge that we faced was in the face of this pandemic, how to make sure that everybody's taken care of, right? So we were planning, you know, to move online. And we were very keenly aware of the fact that some students would have great difficulty with online learning because of where they were, their circumstances at home, etc. So this was a real challenge for us. And the way we addressed it was to basically just make the funds available to support students wherever they were. So, you know, we helped get students home. If they were international students, if they couldn't leave Ghana because the borders were closed, we arranged for housing in Ghana for them with host families. We made sure they had access to data. If they lived in an area where they didn't have access to data, we rented places where they could go to, where they could live and have adequate access to data paid for by the university. And so just taking care of all our students and making sure that everybody had a chance to have as good an experience as possible. And then the second thing was taking care of the team, right? So we had some staff members whose work was very bound to campus. So imagine if you're a cafeteria, you worked in the cafeteria. Campus is closed. What do we do? Do you just lose your income? And again, what we did was find a way to make sure that we could give them payroll support. And so we looked at savings from things like transportation, energy, right? So we're not running a campus, we're not using electricity. Well, those funds were made available to support salaries of the gardeners and the cafeteria staff, etc. I would say this was the biggest challenge, was making sure everything worked financially. And making sure that everybody was taken care of. And I should add that philanthropy was really important to helping us navigate this crisis.
I want to move on to like a bit more of a general question about your vision now. How are you fostering entrepreneurial spirit in your students, and what role does technology have?
That's a great question. And I'd like to just answer by first asking, what is an entrepreneur? And when we say entrepreneurship, what do we mean? For us at Ashesi, we're talking about an entrepreneuring mind. So somebody who's entrepreneurial wherever they are. It's not only starting a business, but being an innovator where they are. And what entrepreneurs do is they question the status quo all the time, right? They try to imagine a new future. They try to imagine solutions to problems around them. And they actually then go and implement those solutions and persist through the difficulty of implementing those solutions. All of that requires courage, right? It requires courage to question the status quo, to think of something new, to execute it, and to persist. And so for us, building the entrepreneuring mind is really about fostering this courage, right? And so you want to have an environment where students are able to try new things and perhaps fail at them and fail gracefully, right? You want them to be able to take intellectual risks, and you want them to learn how to work in teams, right? To work with other people. Because if you want to make any significant change, you want to start a business that's going to be significant, you have to learn to work with people. You have to learn to have empathy for your customers. And so it's all of these things. It's courage, it's empathy, it's teamwork, communication skills, things that we think of as soft skills, but which are really critical, important skills.
I've been really impressed by some of the work that you've done around leadership and the leadership programs that you've implemented, and how you've managed to kind of foster those leadership skills in women as well.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you think you've done differently that has kind of, you know, is a different approach from the way lots of universities were running before and schools were doing things before when it comes to leadership?
Sure. On the question of leadership, the thing that we've done differently is first to understand that good leadership requires somebody to first be a good citizen, right? So, and by good citizen, I mean somebody who thinks about the common good, who thinks about the society around them, and cares about other people. And so what we've done in engaging leadership is in the classroom, in the curriculum, they have a set of seminars that they do around the questions of what constitutes a good leader, what the challenges of a good leader, about citizenship, the good society, about economic justice, and all of that. But it all culminates in a seminar called Leadership as Service. And in that seminar, actually, seminar is not the right word because it's very experiential. They're supposed to go out in the community, find a problem, come up with a solution to that problem, and implement it. And so they go out in society, they go into places that have really big problems, economic problems, and they go engage. And I think that sort of end-to-end discussion about leadership, not just as an academic exercise, but it's something experiential, where they go out and do something important and actually see the effect of this thing that they've done. So if you go into a community that doesn't have clean water, and you help build a borehole or fix a borehole, or to get them solar energy, or get them a library for the kids, and you can see the impact that this has on that community. And that is really a really wonderful way to teach young people how to be leaders. The second thing that we've done is, and I've been very conscious of this from the very beginning, is that we have to model the behavior that we would like our students to have, right? And so the way we run the university, the fact that we don't ever, engage in corruption, bribes and so on, and the fact that I'm very transparent with students. We report to the students every year, every semester, what the situation of the university is. They see the finances of the university. They see the challenges that we think that we have before us. We ask them for their opinions on how to solve those challenges on campus. And so I'm modeling the kind of leadership that I want the students to have. And I think that makes a big difference. And if I were to give an example, I want to give a very concrete example of something that I did. It was spontaneous. It's not something that the typical vice chancellor or university president would do. I was called, this is very early days, a professor walked into my office and said, I'm teaching a computer science class and there's litter everywhere in the classroom. And okay, this is interesting, not expected. So I went to see. I wanted to see, is it that the janitorial staff hadn't done their work? What's going on? And I walked in the classroom and those paper all over the floor. And my instinct was to just start to pick up the paper. And it's just something I did. And as soon as I bent down to pick up a few sheets of paper, the students were up. What's Patrick doing? And then 2 seconds later, the classroom was clean. The floor was clean. The paper, it wasn't about the cleaning staff. It was just, they just let paper. And after that day, there was no litter anywhere on campus. Students came to my office and they apologized and they said, "You made us feel ashamed when you started to pick up the paper." And it made us see that we should have been doing that. First of all, we shouldn't have littered that classroom, and we should clean up after ourselves. And so I think that kind of approach to teaching is often about demonstrating something, right, and guiding people. It's not just preaching in a classroom or just having an intellectual exercise.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good example of just changing the culture of somewhere, isn't it? And
it is.
And I think sort of education is so much more than academia. It's about ethics, isn't it? And about teaching students about those fundamental lessons. Do you think that some of the stuff that you've implemented has had an effect on the wider communities? You know, that those students are taking that out, and have you got any examples of that?
Yes, I have one example which I think was quite profound, which is that in our second year, students did their first elections for student leadership. And the two candidates was a man and a woman. And although they recognized the woman to have all the leadership qualities, and we measured this by surveying them, they voted for the guy, right? And this caused us to engage with them in a conversation about why they voted the way they did. And we showed them the data. You know, when we surveyed you, this is how you rank these two individuals on integrity, on vision, on the ability to work in teams, etc. Yet you chose somebody else. What happened? And because of those kinds of conversations we're having, I think it was two or 3 years later, we had a student government, which for the first time elected a woman as head of student government. It was the first time in Ghana. In Ghana's history, this happened. And she won with 75% of the vote. Now, so it was it was really everybody voted for her. And, within 2 years later, there were other campuses in Ghana that had women as leaders of student government. And I think that, oftentimes what it requires for real change to happen is somebody has to sort of push against or break through the performance horizon that people see for themselves. And once you've done that, then other people follow, right? So that's just one example of where I think, we did something that actually affected the whole country. Changed the way young people thought about who their leaders might be. And this is very important for Ghana's future, I think.
No, absolutely. And, talking about, the growth of and the future for Ghana, it is quite important, isn't it, that people who go abroad to study like you did do come back. And I was really impressed that 90% of your alumni actually, stay on the continent. And I think that's such a brilliant statistic. And I just wondered, how you do it. How do you encourage how do you encourage students to come back when perhaps the money and the temptation to stay somewhere else is so great?
The way to encourage students to stay in Africa or to come back when they leave is, first of all, you work with them to help them build a strong network here. And, the 4 years to 3rd year, they build a network. The second thing is you want to get them to a place where they can get into a rewarding career. And so the work that we've done with career placement has been really critical for this, right? So we've done a lot of work to make sure that our students are going to get good positions, starting positions when they graduate. And then the education they've had has really enabled them to advance in their careers once they get those jobs. And so that combination of things, I think, has been really instrumental in keeping our students here.
Yeah.
They really do get into rewarding careers here.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're encouraging that culture all the way through of looking at what they can better do for their surroundings and their environment, alongside just teaching them the academic side, maybe they grow with that sense of responsibility as well.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. resilience is probably one of the most important and critical qualities. How do you build that in students and prepare them to be effective, an effective part of the workforce for the future of Africa?
Resilience and building resilience is a tough one, right? So you want people to not be fragile. You want people to be vulnerable. You want people to be able to recognize that they're going through a difficult time or they're facing a difficult challenge, but have sort of this hope and this belief that they'll get through it and be all right. And the way we've done it is, again, it's just experiential, right? Just give students opportunities to try new things, to stumble at first and to get it right eventually. I think that the fact that we have every student be engaged in an entrepreneurial project where they start a business and run it on campus and go through sort of the difficulty of competition, right? Sort of market competition in this business they're running on campus. Some of them will fail or not do as well as they thought they would. But they learned so much from that, right? This is very important. The fact that all our courses are very hands-on. So if you're studying engineering and computer science, you're building things, you're designing and building things. And there's not one right answer. There's going to be some solutions that you offer that don't work so well. And you just learn from them and move on. And so just getting people to, I think, recognize that failure is actually an integral part of learning makes a huge difference in their resilience moving forward. And I think oftentimes before students come here, they've sort of gone through these very high stakes exams. If you don't pass this exam, you don't get onto secondary school, or if you don't pass this exam, you don't get onto college. They sort of learn that failure is a terrible, bad thing. And we have to sort of get them to unlearn that, to understand that, there are good luck events and there are bad luck events. There are solutions that work, solutions that don't work, but you learn from all of these things in life.
The whole kind of the way that we're looking at the conference is around the future. And one of the big topics we can't ignore is sustainability. Particularly when it comes to population growth in Africa and the effect on food scarcity and education on the continent. How can education institutions work together with government and business to tackle that huge issue?
I think that the challenges that confront us, especially around sustainability, are huge. On the African continent, the population is projected to increase by a factor of 100% in the next 30 years, right? So we're at 1.1 billion people. It's going to be 2.5 billion people in 30 years. This is big. It's going to stress everything. We've got climate change already, in progress in the world, and so this is a very big challenge. I think that what we need to do is we need to make sure that people are aware of what the challenges are, that we know how to engage problems and come up with solutions to those problems, that we think about all our solutions factoring in the sustainability of the solutions that we're presenting, right? So that's one very critical thing. I would also say that when we think about population growth on the continent, we should also recognize that there's built-in opportunity there, right? There's going to be growing markets. And if we educate people well enough so they're productive, if we educate future leaders well enough so they create an enabling environment, that they're environmentally conscious and so on, then we're going to be fine, better than fine, actually. We don't do those things, then we have a problem on our hands. Then we have a big problem with unemployment and food scarcity and so on. But certainly there are opportunities for us to dramatically improve agriculture. There are opportunities for us to improve the way we do housing and how we build our infrastructure. There are opportunities for improving healthcare and livelihoods. So there are lots of opportunities built into this growth. We just need to make sure we're educating people properly to leverage those opportunities.
Yeah, and I'm sure it must be about investment, because often to do the sustainable thing costs more money, and to educate people about the issue costs money. The cheapest thing to do is to carry on the way things are, right?
It's the cheapest short-term solution, but the most expensive long-term solution. So to just continue with the status quo. And so people need to understand that we should think long-term. We should be looking at what are the costs and benefits of what we're doing, is not just about the short term. It is about the long term for our society.
And I guess it's about, all institutions buying into that idea and collaborating to find.
It is, yes, and it is about examples, right? So again, if you come to our campus, you see that there are things that we've done that are very environmentally sensitive. So we store over 1 million liters of water, rainwater harvested. We have solar power installed. We have a couple of biodigesters that produce, we get energy out of it, right? So methane gas that's used for cooking. We get reclaimed water that's used for the garden. So we're not wasting anything. We sort of have this sort of very circular approach to the use of resources. And it's good for our students to see that. And we've actually had students and faculty from other universities come and visit our campus just to look at what we've done with environmental sensitivity. And I think that sharing of ideas is also important.
Yeah. So I'd like to finish by asking you about your goals for 2022 and what you hope to achieve.
2022, we'd like to get back to some kind of normal, right? So we would want to get back to on campus, students back on campus, thriving. Some of this is going to depend on what happens with the rate of vaccinations here on the African continent.
How is the vaccination program going?
It's currently quite slow. In Ghana, we have less than 3% of the population is vaccinated. And so we're hoping that this will pick up, and it's going to be very important for us. But the key goal is getting back to some kind of normal. This semester, we've got students back on campus, but they're taking some classes online, some in person. And we're going through all the processes of making sure people are tested and isolated as needed, and that we're doing this in a safe way. But 2022 would hope that this is completed. The other thing for 2022 is that we'll be 20 years old in March of next year.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And so we'll be launching into our third decade. And so 2022, we will be setting up our next 10-year strategic plan for the university. And so getting that launched and underway is going to be very important.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I've really appreciated it. And just on a personal level, I think just what you're doing is so inspiring. And I just really, appreciate the time to talk to you, really.
Thank you, Andrea. It's been a pleasure.